At one point in your life, you have almost definitely doubted the origins of a song you were listening to and wondered, where is this from? And for another group of people, this question is either preceded or followed by the question, wait, where have I heard this before? Chances are the answer to both these questions is sampling, the concept of taking a melody or mix or sound from another song and using it in a different, new context. As sampling becomes more and more popular, most have had more and more questions regarding the logistics and legality of sampling. Over time, the concept has won out over any concerns and has been solidified as a revolutionary idea that helps producers easily make a song an instant classic. The situations that make me the most curious are times where people don't even know a song is sampled. It has always been an awesome feeling to find out a song you've been listening to for years has a final boss version. But regardless, from the historical to the controversial, we're going to take a look into the wide world of sampled music and find out exactly what makes it so popular among producers. The history of sampling starts with the invention of the tape recorder, because as early as the 1940s, composers were said to be using recorded versions of sounds and manipulating them for their own uses. Then with musical instruments like the mellotron being invented, sampling was further cemented as the process of using sounds from somewhere else as an instrument. This definition would start changing as of the 70s because hip-hop artists would start to use vinyl manipulation to take more of a clip of a sound from somewhere else and use it for a beat that is more suited for rappers and dancers. But as time passed and the technology got more and more advanced, producers went from being forced to use only 2 to 4 measures of songs to being able to take the whole parts of songs they wanted and manipulate them even further. But all this did not go without controversy. These records were not easy to get passed through labels, and it's rumored that for years before the official first use of sampling in hip-hop, that DJs would spin and mix funk beats for MCs to rap over in bars and clubs. But as it became more mainstream, labels started demanding more and more money from these producers who were motivated by the ease and cheapness of using these sampled beats. But motivation would win out over capitalism, as many producers would use these samples first and then deal with the consequences after without even hesitation at all. This did not come without repercussion though, as many producers were taken to court and forced to go up against bands who had no interest in being there either. For example, the forced dispute between De La Soul and the Turtles. That being said, this is one of the rare cases where passion that artists have wins out over any corporations, as these songs stayed alive, and no matter how hard these labels tried, producers would keep on creating these sampled masterpieces. But from the illegal to the perfectly safe, producers since the 70s have not been able to keep their hands off of funk, jazz, soul, and rock music alike. To start, I wanted to take a look at the song Amen Brother by the Winstons. This song was massively influential and can be argued to have created its own genre. It can be linked back to not hundreds, but thousands of songs throughout the years, most famously Straight Outta Compton by NWA. But it really is hard to overstate just how important this song is to the entire hip-hop and even wider beyond hip-hop scenes. Its drum solo is so famous that it has been labeled as simply the Amen break, and is referred as such to give it the respect that it has earned over the years. But to a very wide and uninitiated audience, it might be hard to tell exactly where that sample comes from. And it's because of that most people wouldn't even know about this song at all. Not all samples throughout history are cryptic. For example, ABBA's Gimme Gimme Gimme, which was sampled by none other than Madonna in Hung Up. Obviously, both songs have their respective fame, but to a listener who hears only the Madonna version, it would leave even them saying, wait a minute, because the familiar melody just seems perfectly placed in with a certain puzzle piece type fit that doesn't resemble a unique hook. Another important example of sampling is Good Times by Flo Rida. This is taken from the intro of the song Something's Got a Hold on Me by Etta James. Similarly to Hung Up, you can tell where the sample is. It has that same puzzle piece type fit into the track, but where this stands out from the rest is that Flo Rida took the song and used it in such a wildly different context. The Etta James version is a soul song which has chorus parts in between her solo vocals, but Flo Rida took the solo parts only and made something that can only be defined as a house banger. It is at this point in the video I bet you are all thinking of at least one Kanye West song with a popular sample, whether it be Famous, Blood on the Leaves, Father Stretch My Hand Part 1, or Bound 2. And I think, despite recent controversy, his music is important to be recognized when talking about famous samples. While I, by no means, support or endorse his recent statements, I think his use of sampling in his discography has been nothing short of genius. Where Kanye West innovated is in the little details of how he sampled, as well as how he chose for mostly untapped genres. Like, for example, in Good Morning, where Ye doesn't at all shy away from using a relatively modern sample, but does so within a very small window. He takes only about 2 bars of the vocal and still makes a huge impact with the sample itself. And he does the same thing again in Famous, where the second half of the song sports an extremely short sample taken from an even shorter part of a song by Sister Nancy. Another artist that stands out to me is MF Doom. I recently started listening to Doom when I heard the track All Caps. MF Doom is obviously famous for his rhymes being complicated and in-depth, but in my opinion, where he shined the brightest was in his instrumentals. They simultaneously were blissfully simple but also deep and multi-layered. There are numerous tracks where his instrumental takes the main stage, for example in the track Rap Snitch Knishes, where the instrumental, sampled from David Bowie's Space Oddity, became its own cultural staple. What makes these instrumentals just so impressive is the source material they are taken from. Oftentimes these instrumentals play their own role in the story of Doom or are just flat out obscure and impressive. Take the track Phasers from the King Ghidorah album Take Me to Your Leader. The beginning is a sample from Invasion of the Astro Monster and has lyrical nods from both Succedo by Phil Collins and Paid in Full by Eric B. and Rakim. It is a unique and impressive feat to not only take an intro from a classic movie and use it to intro a rap song, but also dig deeper into that movie's audio and find an instrumental deep inside of it. It is because of this that I feel like MF Doom is not only one of the best rappers of all time, but I think he will go down as having one of the best production behind his rapping as well. In reality, there's two types of sampling. There's practical sampling and then there's recognizable sampling. Practical sampling is when producers use a sound to their advantage to fill a void in a song they're making, whereas recognizable sampling is when a song is built around a certain sound that the producer hears. A perfect way to see this in action is looking at two examples we already saw in this video. Flo Rida in Good Feeling is building the song around the Etta James sample because he's making it the focal point of the tune. The entire hook of the song is entirely based around that Etta James sample. Therefore, every single time you hear the song, the one thing you're going to be looking forward to is her vocal that is placed in the song. This experience is contrasted by MF Doom's use of his samples in Phasers or All Caps, where the sample is used as a part of an entire ensemble of samples and sounds from the track and the album for that matter. So at the end of the day, the samples we will recognize the most are samples like Good Feeling, but the samples that are often deeper in meaning and purpose are practical samples like in Phasers or All Caps. So what makes samples just so special really depends on how they are used. On one hand, if a sample is used as the foundation for a song, catching the listener's attention, most people will form a connection with that recognizable hook. On the other hand, sampling can be used to enhance the overall experience of the listener and might not be as flashy or instantly noticeable. Whatever the reason is though, sampling is undeniably special, and like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, it is a magical feeling when you find out a song you love has an extremely different version. Sampling, more than any other musical phenomenon, proves the importance of melody and musical hooks. Hooks are the foundation of pop music and have been for decades, and when producers sample melodies, they are simply featuring a standout hook in a brand new context. Without any loss of creativity or ingenuity, the process of sampling allows producers to pay homage to famous melodies and hooks from the past. One of the craziest and honestly funniest examples of sampling controversy was between the British band The Jams and ABBA. Their album, What the Fuck Is Going On, was a rather lazy sampled mess that was definitely plagiarism by definition. It was met with mixed reviews upon release, but the track that really stirred the pot was the track The Queen and I. It was almost a direct sample of ABBA's Dancing Queen, and it actually got them all the way to court against the Swedish band's label. This trial took the album off the market and also led to the band desperately wanting to meet and talk with the Swedish band members personally. Their master plan was to take a gold disc of the album and a photographer and a journalist to ABBA's private residence in order to confront them. When they weren't there, the band instead took photos with the blonde prostitute which was there instead, which probably goes down as one of the dumbest things a band has ever done in response to controversy. This example really just goes to show how sampling was not a pretty art form, but it's comforting that laziness like this has always been quickly criticized and dealt with accordingly. I hate to bring him back up, but the next example I want to talk about has to do with Kanye West. This situation was frankly too interesting not to talk about, and honestly, it's because it's a roller coaster of emotions. So the song Gold Digger is often confused for having a sampled instrumental. However, careful/knowledgeable listeners know the vocals are recorded by Jamie Foxx for the project. That being said, the track wasn't entirely clean of samples, because apparently there are background chants sampled from David Pryor's band Thunder and Lightning. His children took issue with this unauthorized sample, so they took him to court over it. The judge, in the end, decided that the samples were distorted and therefore unrecognizable, and deemed it that they were not profiting off of the late David Pryor or his music. I wanted to include this example because it shows the more tricky side of sampling disputes and how sometimes it's hard to tell the intentions of the plaintiffs and it's not always easy to say who actually deserves to be in the right. The last example I want to talk about is about my favorite Jay-Z song, Big Pimpin'. This song had 2 separate lawsuits filed against it, both because of the producer Timbaland's use of the song Kosara Kosara. Similar to the last example, a relative of the performers of the original song sued Timbaland over violations of their moral rights. The judge agreed that the statement is rather vague and dismissed both lawsuits that were filed against Timbaland. This example is important because it really shows how sampling really had the opportunity to blow up in the producers' faces, unbeknownst to the artists, Jay-Z in this example. Here, the plaintiffs happen to not have enough of a basis, but without careful copyright rule following, sampling can be risky to say the least. Producers throughout the entire history of sampling have been getting punished for not following specific copyright rules, and this is a perfect example of a situation where if it had gone a different way, Timbaland could have been very seriously punished. So that's about all I have to say about sampling. That covers the history of sampling, that covers major examples of sampling that we've seen throughout history, and that also covers some of the controversies that we've seen surrounding sampling music. So real quick before I wrap the video up, I just wanted to plug my Twitch real quick. I am on my way to affiliate because I plan on streaming more. In fact, when you're watching this video, there's a pretty good chance that I'm streaming as we speak. And other than that, I will see you guys in the next video.
Let's go.